A powerful publisher invented a fake engagement with her assistant to avoid deportation. But when they arrived at his family's home in Alaska, something unexpected happened. What began as a desperate lie turned into the truest love she had ever experienced. Secrets came to light, hearts opened, and their lives changed forever in ways no one could have predicted. A story of transformation, family, and true love. Get ready, because you will fall in love and be moved by the journey of a woman who discovered that sometimes the best truths are born from the most well-intentioned lies. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment on what you thought of this story. The sound of high heels echoed through the hallway of Sterling and Associates like a military march, announcing Jessica Roy's arrival even before her silhouette appeared. Employees huddled at their desks, pretending to be absorbed in spreadsheets and reports, but everyone knew she was approaching. Jessica was a force of nature, a 35-year-old editor-in-chief who had transformed the small publishing house into one of the most respected in New York in just 5 years. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her charcoal gray suit was as sharp as her gaze. Jessica didn't smile, didn't make small talk, and certainly didn't tolerate incompetence. She was efficient, ruthless, and according to the rumors circulating in the halls, heartless. Garner. His voice cut through the air like a blade. "My office now." Matthew Garner looked up from his computer, nervously adjusted his glasses, and stood up from his desk. At 28, he had been Jessica's personal assistant for 3 years. A record considering his predecessors rarely lasted more than 6 months. Matthew had learned to navigate his boss's mood swings, anticipating her needs, and enduring her criticism with almost supernatural patience. "Yes, ma'am," he murmured, picking up his notebook and following her into the glass office that dominated the floor. Jessica settled behind her mahogany desk, not offering Matthew a seat. He remained standing, pen in hand, awaiting the day's instructions. The office was a perfect reflection of its occupant. Minimalist, cold, and intimidating. There were no personal photos, no blueprints, or any human touch. Just publishing industry awards and neat stacks of manuscripts. "Margot Williams' book needs to be at the printer by Friday," Jessica began, flipping through a report. "The cover design is terrible. The marketing department apparently missed the schedule, and the proofreading isn't finished yet. Fix it." "Sure," Matthew scribbled quickly. "Anything else?" Jessica looked at him for a moment, as if she was going to say something important, but then she shook her head. "That's all. Oh, and cancel my lunch meeting with Random House. I have more important things to do." Matthew nodded and was turning to leave when the office door burst open. Bob Sterling, the label's founder and nominally Jessica's boss, walked in with an expression Matthew had never seen before, a mix of urgency and barely concealed panic. "Jessica, we need to talk. Now." Bob looked at Matthew. "In private." Matthew started to leave, but Jessica held up her hand. "He can stay. Matthew knows how to keep secrets." She crossed her arms. "What now, Bob?" The older man ran a hand through his gray hair and dropped into one of the leather chairs. "I got a call from the immigration department this morning. They're going to revoke your work visa." The silence that followed was deafening. Matthew saw the color drain from Jessica's face, though she maintained an impassive expression. "What do you mean they're going to revoke it?" His voice came out lower than usual. "Apparently there's been a change in the law. Temporary visas like yours are being reviewed, and you're no longer eligible for renewal." Bob sighed heavily. "You have 2 weeks to leave the country, Jess." Matthew felt his stomach sink. He knew Jessica's story. Born in Canada, she had moved to the United States at a young age to attend college and build her career. Her whole life was here now. "What if I get married?" Jessica asked suddenly, making both Bob and Matthew look at her in surprise. "Well, yes. Marriage to an American citizen would solve the problem immediately." Bob frowned. "But you need someone to marry, Jessica. And as far as I know, you're not even dating." Jessica was silent for a long moment, her fingers drumming on the mahogany table. Matthew could practically see the gears turning in her mind. She'd always been a problem solver, someone who found ways out of impossible situations. But this time she seemed truly trapped. Then his eyes locked on Matthew, and he felt a shiver run down his spine. "Actually," Jessica said slowly, a cold smile forming on her lips, "I'm engaged." Bob blinked in confusion. Matthew felt the world spin. "Excuse me?" Bob stammered. Jessica rose gracefully and walked over to Matthew, who stood frozen in place. Without warning, she slipped her arm through his and leaned against his shoulder in a way that managed to be both possessive and theatrical. "Matthew and I have been engaged for 2 months," she said with a conviction that would have been impressive if it hadn't been completely fabricated. "We didn't want to mix our personal and professional lives, so we kept it a secret." Matthew's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He could feel the heat of Jessica's body pressed against his, the expensive perfume she wore filling his senses. His knees felt like they'd turned to jelly. He stammered. "We were planning to tell everyone at the company party next month," Jessica continued, squeezing Matthew's arm almost painfully. "A subtle way of reminding him to stick to the script. But given the circumstances, I think we can fast-track our wedding plans." Bob looked at them as if he had seen ghosts. "Jessica Roy and Matthew Garner? You two?" He nodded slowly. "I mean, congratulations, I guess. But this is unexpected." "Love is sometimes unexpected," Jessica replied, and Matthew almost choked on the irony. After Bob left the office, still stunned by the revelation, Jessica let go of Matthew's arm and returned to her desk as if nothing had happened. "Sit down," she said, and for the first time in 3 years, it didn't sound like an order. Matthew slumped heavily in his chair, still processing what had just happened. "Have you completely lost your mind?" He finally managed to speak. "Probably," Jessica admitted, opening a drawer and pulling out a bottle of whiskey Matthew hadn't even known existed. "Would you like a drink? I think we both could use one." "It's 10 in the morning," Matthew pointed out, but accepted the cup she offered him. Unusual day, unusual circumstances. Jessica took a sip and grimaced. "Look, Matthew, I know this sounds insane. Looks like it. You literally made up an engagement in front of our boss. And you didn't contradict me?" she retorted. "Which I must say was very clever of you." Matthew stared at her, trying to figure out if she was serious. "Do you really expect me to participate in this farce?" "I don't expect anything," Jessica said, and for a moment her mask of coldness cracked slightly. "But I'm asking. Matthew, I've built my entire life here. This company, my career, everything I am is in New York. If I go back to Canada now..." She didn't finish her sentence, but she didn't need to. Matthew had seen Jessica work late hours, sacrifice weekends and holidays, live and breathe for Sterling and Associates. The firm was more than her job, it was her identity. "And what do I get out of this?" Matthew asked, surprised at his own boldness. Jessica arched an eyebrow, clearly not expecting him to negotiate. "What do you want?" Matthew thought for a moment. For 3 years he had been treated like an expensive piece of furniture, useful but ignored. He had swallowed humiliations, worked in silence, and dreamed of the day he would be recognized for his talent. "I want to be promoted to assistant editor," he said firmly, "with a salary commensurate with the position. And I want my name to appear in the credits of the books I help edit." Jessica studied him for a long moment. "Done," she said finally. "Anything else?" "Respect," Matthew added, surprising them both. "I want to be treated as a partner, not a doormat." A genuine smile, the first Matthew had ever seen, appeared briefly on Jessica's face. "Interesting. It seems my assistant has more personality than I imagined." "Former assistant," Matthew corrected. "If we're going to do this, let's do it right." The plane to Anchorage was packed with tourists excited to see the northern lights and professional fishermen returning home. Jessica had chosen the window seat and spent most of the flight staring at the clouds, lost in thought. Matthew discreetly observed her nervous mannerisms, the way she constantly fixed her hair, the way she drummed her fingers on the seat, the way she checked her phone every 5 minutes. "First time in Alaska?" asked an elderly lady across the aisle. "Yes," Jessica replied politely. "Oh, how wonderful. Honeymoon?" Matthew nearly choked on the water he was drinking. Jessica glanced at him quickly before replying. "Something like that. How romantic. My Harold and I came here for our honeymoon 40 years ago." The woman smiled nostalgically. There's no more beautiful place in the world to fall in love. When they finally landed in Anchorage, they still had a 2-hour flight in a small plane to Sitka. Jessica looked at the 8-seater aircraft with an expression Matthew couldn't read. "You don't like planes?" he asked. "I don't like small planes," she admitted. "They look like a can of flying sardines." "The pilot is good," Matthew assured, checking their luggage. "I've flown with him several times." During the flight to Sitka, Matthew pointed out the window, trying to distract Jessica from her obvious anxiety. The snow-capped mountains, the dense pine forests, the fjords winding between the rocky peaks. It all looked like something out of a postcard. "It's beautiful," Jessica admitted, relaxing a little. "Wait until you see the town. Sitka is special." When the plane finally touched down on the short runway at Sitka Airport, Jessica breathed a sigh of relief. Outside, Matthew could see his family waiting. His tall, bearded father, his petite, energetic mother, Danny with a wide smile, and Grandma Anna, who, despite her 83 years, still had an erect posture and piercing eyes. "Here we go," Matthew muttered, picking up his luggage. "Matthew." Grace Garner ran to hug her son as soon as they left the terminal. "Oh, honey, you're so skinny. Are they not feeding you properly in New York?" "Mom, I'm fine," Matthew laughed, returning the tight hug. Joe Garner approached to greet his son with a hearty pat on the back, while Danny made sarcastic comments about Matthew's city clothes. Throughout this family outpouring, Jessica stood a little to the side, watching with an expression Matthew couldn't interpret. "And this must be Jessica." Anna Garner stepped closer, studying the young woman with shrewd eyes. "Grandma, this is Jessica Roy," Matthew said, putting his arm around Jessica's waist in a gesture that tried to look natural. "Jessica, this is my grandmother, Anna. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Garner." Jessica extended her hand politely. Anna ignored the outstretched hand and pulled Jessica into a warm hug. "No handshakes, dear. You're going to be part of the family." She stepped back to study Jessica better. "My God, what a beautiful woman. Matthew has good taste." Jessica blushed slightly, something Matthew had never seen happen. "Thank you. You have a lovely family. And you have a beautiful voice." Grace joined the group. "Matthew never told us you had an accent." Matthew and Jessica exchanged a quick glance. They had crafted a detailed story about their relationship, but small details like Jessica's slight Canadian accent had gone unnoticed. "Jessica is originally from Canada," Matthew explained quickly. "Vancouver." "Oh, how interesting." Joe joined the conversation. "I've flown to Vancouver a few times, beautiful city." During the drive home in the family van, Jessica was bombarded with questions about her life, her work, and most importantly, how she and Matthew fell in love. Matthew could sense her discomfort, how carefully she chose each word and how tense her muscles were. "So when did you guys start dating?" Danny asked directly. "A few months ago," Jessica replied, following the script they had rehearsed. "And how was it the first time they knew they were in love?" Grace persisted, with the enthusiasm of a hopeless romantic. Matthew saw Jessica open her mouth, unsure of what to say. He quickly intervened. "It was during the conference in Chicago. I was presenting a project and Jessica was in the audience. When our eyes met, it was as if the world stopped." "How romantic," Grace sighed. "And you, Jessica, how did you know Matthew was special?" Jessica looked at Matthew, and for a moment he saw something real in her eyes, a vulnerability she rarely showed. "He was kind to me when no one else was," she said softly, and Matthew was sure she wasn't following any script. The Garner house was everything Jessica had imagined and feared. It was a rustic wooden building overlooking the ocean, surrounded by tall pine trees and with a large porch decorated with flower pots. Inside were handmade rugs, family photos on every available surface, and the welcoming scent of cinnamon and pine. "Leave your bags here for now," Grace said, pointing to a corner of the room. "Jessica, dear, you must be exhausted from the trip. Would you like some coffee? Hot chocolate? I have fresh cookies coming out of the oven." "Coffee would be great, thanks," Jessica replied, looking around the house curiously. Matthew watched her study the photographs on the wall. Decades of family moments captured. Birthdays, graduations, holidays, fishing trips, first days of school. It was a visual history of a close-knit, happy family, something completely foreign to Jessica. "Is this you?" she asked, standing in front of a photo of Matthew at age 10, proudly holding a large fish. "My first serious fishing trip," Matthew confirmed, approaching her. Grandma Anna taught me how to fish that summer. You look so happy, Jessica murmured, and there was something melancholy in her voice. You'll be sharing Matthew's room, Grace announced, returning from the kitchen with a tray of coffee and cookies. I hope you don't mind. The house isn't very big, but it's cozy. Jessica and Matthew exchanged a quick glance. They had discussed this possibility, but the theory was very different from the reality. Sure, no problem, Matthew said quickly. Great. Grace smiled. Dinner will be in an hour. Jessica, dear, do you eat fish? Joe caught fresh salmon this morning. I eat everything, Jessica lied, remembering her strict diet of salads and organic food in New York. When they went upstairs to Matthew's room, Jessica looked around with a puzzled expression. The room was small but cozy, with a double bed, a wooden desk, and shelves filled with books and swimming trophies from high school. You can have the bed, Matthew offered quickly. I'll sleep on the floor. Don't be ridiculous, Jessica replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. We're adults. We can share a bed without it being awkward. Matthew nodded, but they both knew it would be anything but simple. They're intense, Jessica commented after a moment. They love you, Matthew corrected. That's how my family shows affection. Questions, food, hugs. I know it's different from what you're used to. Different is a polite way of saying it. Jessica laughed humorlessly. I don't know how to act around them, Matthew. I don't know how to be part of a family. Matthew sat beside her on the bed, keeping a respectful distance. Be yourself. They already like you. They like the idea of me, of Matthew's girlfriend finally bringing home. Jessica sighed. What if they find out it's all a lie? They won't find out, Matthew said with more confidence than he felt. Dinner was an experience Jessica would never forget. The kitchen table wasn't big enough for 6, so they improvised with extra chairs and a bench. Joe served grilled salmon with vegetables from Grace's garden, while Anna told embarrassing stories from Matthew's childhood. And then 7-year-old Matthew decided he wanted to be a professional diver, Anna was saying. He jumped off the pier wearing swimming goggles and a snorkel, not realizing the tide was low. Grandma, Matthew protested, blushing. He was stuck in the mud up to his neck. Danny finished laughing. Dad had to pull him out with a rope. Jessica found herself laughing genuinely for the first time in a long time. The stories were funny, but more than that, she could see the love behind each shared memory. And you, Jessica? Grace asked. Do you have any funny stories from your childhood? Jessica was silent for a moment. Her childhood had been lonely, spent mostly in boarding schools after her parents' deaths. There were no funny stories to tell. I was a very serious child, she said finally. Always with my nose in books. Ah, an intellectual. Anna approved. Matthew was like that too. Always reading, always asking questions. It's true, Jessica agreed, looking at Matthew. He's still like that, always asking intelligent questions, always thinking. Matthew felt something tighten in his chest. There was something in the way Jessica spoke, a genuine admiration that went beyond her rehearsed script. After dinner, while they were helping with the washing up, Grace pulled Jessica aside. Can I speak to you in private? She asked softly. Jessica nodded, though she looked nervous. I just wanted to say, Grace began, that I've never seen Matthew so happy. In all the years he lived in New York, whenever he came to visit, there was a loneliness in his eyes. But now he shines when he looks at you. Jessica felt her throat tighten. He's a special man, she managed to say. Yes, it is. And he deserves someone who values him. Grace gently touched Jessica's arm. I can see you value him. Thank you for that. Later, when they were finally alone in the room, Jessica sat silently on the edge of the bed. Matthew noticed that she was trembling slightly. Are you well? Your family is amazing, Jessica said softly. I've never experienced anything like this. Like this? Unconditional love, acceptance. The way they look at you, the way they talk about you. She shook her head. They really care about each other. Matthew sat down beside her. Of course they care. That's what families do. Not all families, Jessica muttered. That night, as they lay side by side in the darkness of the room, both pretending to sleep, Matthew heard Jessica sobbing softly. He wanted to comfort her, to ask what was wrong, but something told him she needed this moment to herself. The second day in Sitka started early, with Grace knocking on the bedroom door at 7 in the morning. "Wake up, lazy bones," she shouted happily. "Today we're going to show Jessica the city." Matthew groaned and pulled the pillow over his head, but Jessica was already sitting up in bed, wide awake. She hadn't slept much, but she was determined to play her role to the best of her ability. "Good morning," she murmured to Matthew, who was still trying to wake up. "Sorry about them," he said, rubbing his eyes. "My family doesn't know the concept of sleeping in." Jessica smiled, and Matthew could tell it was a genuine smile, not the professional smile she wore at work. Breakfast was a hearty meal. Blueberry pancakes, bacon, eggs, fresh orange juice, and strong coffee. Jessica, accustomed to her coffee black and perhaps a Greek yogurt, was impressed by the sheer amount of food. "Eat, honey," Anna insisted, putting another pancake on Jessica's plate. "You're too thin." "Grandma, she doesn't need to," Matthew began, but Jessica interrupted him. "Everything is delicious, Mrs. Garner." "Thank you." After breakfast, Joe took Jessica and Matthew on a tour of the town in his truck. Sitka was small and picturesque, with narrow streets lined with colorful wooden houses and stunning ocean views. Jessica was captivated by the simplicity and beauty of the place, so different from the constant hustle and bustle of New York. "That's where Matthew went to school." Joe pointed to a small red brick schoolhouse. "He was the best student in his class." "Daddy," Matthew protested, embarrassed. "It's true. The teacher always said you'd go far." Joe looked at Jessica in the rearview mirror. "And look, you brought a beautiful woman back home." They stopped at the harbor, where Danny worked at his family's tourism business. Jessica watched the fishing boats and tourist boats bobbing gently in the crystal-clear water. "Want to go for a ride?" Danny offered, pointing to a smaller boat. "I can show you some of the most beautiful spots in the area." Jessica hesitated. She wasn't exactly the adventurous type, but something about the relaxed atmosphere of the place made her nod. Why not? The boat ride was a revelation. Jessica, who spent most of her days in closed offices under artificial light, found herself awed by the vastness of the ocean, the snow-capped mountains in the background, and the abundant wildlife. They saw seals resting on rocks, eagles fishing, and even a whale in the distance. "It's amazing," Jessica murmured, leaning over the railing of the boat. Matthew watched her, noticing how the wind ruffled her blonde hair and how her eyes shone with genuine admiration. It was the first time he had seen her completely relaxed. "Be careful not to fall," he said, approaching her. "I won't fall." Jessica laughed, but when the boat rocked unexpectedly, she lost her balance. Matthew grabbed her waist, pulling her against his chest. For a moment they stayed like that, very close, gazing into each other's eyes. Jessica felt her heart race, and it had nothing to do with the fright of the boat. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always," Matthew replied, and there was something in his voice that made Jessica wonder if he was still just acting. That afternoon, Anna insisted on taking Jessica to meet her friends at the community center, where their weekly folk dance class was taking place. "Grandma, Jessica probably doesn't want to," Matthew tried to protest. "Of course you do," Anna interrupted. "All the women in the Garner family know how to dance. It's tradition." The community center was a simple building with wooden floors and mirrors on the walls. About 15 women of various ages were present, all eager to meet Matthew's fiancée. "Everyone, this is Jessica," Anna announced proudly. "My grandson's fiancée." Jessica waved shyly, feeling completely out of place in her dress pants and silk blouse among women wearing casual, comfortable clothes. "How pretty," one of the women exclaimed. Matthew always had good taste. "Can you dance, dear?" asked another. "A little," Jessica lied. She had learned ballroom dancing in school, but she had never danced folklore. The music started, a cheerful, infectious tune that got all the women moving naturally. Jessica tried to follow the steps, but she was clearly uncomfortable and out of rhythm. "Relax, honey." Anna came closer, holding her hands. "It's not about doing it right. It's about having fun." Anna was a natural dancer, even at 83. She guided Jessica through the basic steps, laughing when they both made mistakes and encouraging her to keep trying. "Like that!" Anna exclaimed when Jessica finally managed to follow a simple pattern. "You're getting the hang of it!" Matthew had arrived to pick up Jessica and stood in the doorway watching. There was something magical about seeing Jessica, always so collected and serious, laughing as she danced uncoordinatedly with her grandmother. Her hair had escaped its bun, her cheeks were flushed, and she looked happy, genuinely happy. When the music stopped, Jessica was breathless and laughing. "That was amazing," she said to Anna. "Thank you for teaching me. You're a good student," Anna replied, hugging her. "And you have a generous heart. I can see why Matthew fell in love with you." Jessica felt her throat tighten. If Anna knew the truth. "Ready to go?" Matthew asked, approaching. "I think so," Jessica replied, still trying to regulate her breathing. On the way home, they walked in silence down Sitka's main street. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. "Did you have fun today?" Matthew finally asked. "More than I imagined," Jessica admitted. "Your grandmother is special. She liked you." "A lot." Matthew hesitated. "Actually, the whole family did. They liked the Jessica they met today. The relaxed version. The one who laughs and dances badly." Jessica sighed. "Not the real Jessica." "And who says this isn't the real Jessica?" Matthew stopped walking and turned to her. "Maybe you've spent so much time being the tough boss that you've forgotten who you really are underneath it all." Jessica stared at him, unsure of what to say. The idea that his true self might be that laughing, dancing person was both alluring and terrifying. That night, after a relaxed dinner where Jessica actually participated in the family conversations, she and Matthew went upstairs to their bedroom. Jessica had changed out of her formal clothes into simple pajamas Grace had borrowed, and Matthew noticed how much younger and more vulnerable she looked without her professional armor. "Can I ask you something?" Matthew said as he arranged extra pillows on the floor. "Of course. Why did you really come to the United States? I mean, the real story, not the edited version you tell in interviews." Jessica was silent for so long that Matthew thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she sat up in bed and began to speak, looking at her hands. "My parents died when I was 16. Car accident." His voice was low and careful. "I had no other close relatives, so I went to foster care. It wasn't pleasant." Matthew stopped arranging the pillows and sat down in the desk chair, giving her his full attention. "On my 18th birthday, I inherited my parents' money. It wasn't much, but it was enough for college. I wanted to get as far away from Canada as possible, start a completely new life where no one would know me as the orphan girl." Jessica finally looked at him. "New York seemed like the perfect place to reinvent myself. And you did it," Matthew said gently. "I did it. I created a persona. Jessica Roy, the ruthless editor, the woman who doesn't need anyone. And it worked. I had success, respect, independence." She paused. "But I never had that." "What is this?" Jessica gestured vaguely toward the door, indicating the house and family below. "Warmth, unconditional acceptance, a place where I can just be." Matthew felt his heart sink. Suddenly, Jessica's professional coldness made a lot more sense. It wasn't cruelty. It was protectiveness. "Jessica," he began, but she interrupted him. "Don't feel sorry for me, Matthew. I made my choices and built a good life. It's just that being here with your family makes me realize what I chose not to have. It's not pity," Matthew said firmly. "It's admiration. You built an empire from nothing all by yourself. That's incredible." Jessica looked at him in surprise. "Do you really believe that?" "Of course I do. I've been working with you for 3 years, remember? I've seen how you fight for each book, how you dedicate yourself to finding new talent, how you transform manuscripts into works of art. You're brilliant, Jessica." Jessica felt tears well up in her eyes. How long had it been since someone praised her for who she really was, instead of criticizing her for what she wasn't? "Thank you," she whispered. "And you know what? My family can see it too. They don't care about your expensive suits or your fearsome reputation. They see the woman who laughs when you dance badly, and who listens with genuine attention when Grandma Anna tells her stories." "Matthew," Jessica said softly. "Trying? Thank you for bringing me here, for letting me be a part of this, even if it's just pretend." Matthew stared at her for a long moment. There were so many things he wanted to tell her, that she didn't feel like a fake to him, that she deserved all the happiness in the world. that his family had adopted her as one of their own because they saw something special in her. Instead, he just said, "It's not pretending for them. For my family, you're already part of our history." The third day in Sitka dawned with a storm. Rain pelted the windows and the wind howled through the pines, creating a cozy atmosphere inside the warm house. Jessica woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, but this time she wasn't overwhelmed by the prospect of another day of intense family interaction. "Good morning, sleepyhead." Matthew was getting dressed when she opened her eyes. "What time is it?" Jessica asked, stretching. 8:30. "You slept almost 10 hours. Jessica sat up in bed, surprised. In New York, she rarely slept more than 5 or 6 hours a night. "It must be the fresh air," she commented. "Or maybe you're finally relaxing," Matthew suggested with a smile. During breakfast, Grace announced that she had changed her plans for the day due to the weather. "I thought we could have a quiet day at home. Jessica can help me in the kitchen. Anna wants to teach you two how to play cribbage, and tonight we have the extended family gathering." "Extended family reunion?" Jessica asked, trying not to sound nervous. "Uncles, cousins, some close neighbors," Joe explained. "They're all curious to meet the woman who finally won Matthew's heart." Jessica and Matthew exchanged a quick glance. More people meant more chances of someone spotting inconsistencies in their story. "It'll be fun," Danny added with a smirk. "Especially when Uncle Robert starts asking his probing questions. He still thinks he's a detective." The morning passed peacefully. Jessica found herself genuinely enjoying helping Grace in the kitchen, learning family recipes, and listening to stories about Matthew's childhood. Grace had a warm conversational style that made Jessica feel included without pressuring her. Matthew was always stubborn, Grace was saying as she taught Jessica how to make apple pie. Once he decided he wanted something, he never gave up. Like when he wanted to learn to play the guitar at 12. "Does he play the guitar?" Jessica asked, surprised. He played. He practiced for 2 years until he could play Hotel California perfectly. Then he lost interest and moved on to his next obsession. Grace laughed. But that focus, that determination, it never changed. "When he told me about you, I knew he was serious." Matthew never did anything halfway. Jessica felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. If only Grace knew that every relationship was an act. That afternoon, while Anna was teaching Jessica and Matthew how to play cribbage, the phone rang. Grace answered and returned with a worried expression. It was Aunt Margaret. "She has the flu and won't be able to come tonight." Grace paused. "Actually, half the family can't come because of this flu going around." "So we cancel?" Matthew asked, trying to hide the relief in his voice. "Of course not," Anna declared. "Those who can come will still come. And we have a special surprise for you two." "What kind of surprise?" Jessica asked cautiously. Anna and Grace exchanged conspiratorial looks. "You'll find out," Grace said with a mysterious smile. By 7 o'clock, the house was full. Even with half the family sick, there were still 15 people crammed into the living room. Jessica was introduced to aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, and close family friends, each with their own questions and opinions about the relationship. Uncle Robert, as Danny had predicted, was particularly investigative. "So, Jessica, what does a sophisticated New York editor see in our Matthew?" he asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Robert," Joe warned. "It's a fair question," Jessica replied calmly. "Matthew is smart, kind, and has an integrity that's rare in New York. Plus, he makes me laugh. And you, Matthew? What do you see in her?" Robert continued. Matthew looked at Jessica, and for a moment seemed to forget there was an audience watching. "Jessica is the strongest woman I've ever known," he said slowly. "She built an empire on her own, but she still manages to be kind when she thinks no one is looking. She's intelligent in a way that challenges me, and when she really smiles, it's like the sun coming out after a storm." The silence that followed was broken by a collective sigh from the women present. "That was beautiful," Cousin Sarah murmured. Jessica felt her heart race. The way Matthew had spoken, the look in his eyes, it didn't seem like an act. "Well," Anna stood up, clapping her hands. "It's time for the surprise." Grace brought an old guitar from the music room, and Anna took out a small package. "This one," Anna said, handing the package to Jessica, "was my mother's, and it was her mother's." It was always passed down to the eldest daughter-in-law in each generation. Jessica opened the package with trembling hands. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. "I can't accept this," Jessica said quickly. "It's a family heirloom, and your family now," Anna insisted, "even if it's not official yet." Jessica looked at Matthew, feeling completely lost. How could she accept something so precious when it was all a lie? "Grandma, maybe it's too early." Matthew tried to intervene. "Nonsense," Anna cut in. "And now, Matthew, you're going to play that beautiful song for your bride, like a good future husband." "What song?" Matthew asked, looking confused. "Make You Feel My Love," Anna replied as if it were obvious. "Grace told me you learned to play for Jessica." Matthew and Jessica looked at each other in panic. They had never discussed music in their practice sessions. Matthew began. "We're waiting," Uncle Robert said with a challenging smile. Matthew picked up the guitar, his hands shaking slightly. Jessica could tell he really knew how to play. His movements were natural even though he was nervous. He began to play, and his voice, though not professional, was rich and sincere. Jessica watched him sing, and something inside her broke. The words of the song seemed addressed directly to her, about doing anything for love, about being there when the world falls apart. By the time he finished, there were tears in the eyes of several people in the room. Jessica was struggling to control her own emotions. "That was beautiful," Grace whispered. "Now Jessica needs to sing something," Cousin Sarah suggested. "Oh no," Jessica said quickly. "I don't sing." "Everyone sings," Anna insisted. "At least one song." Jessica felt every eye in the room fixed on her. She could feel panic rising in her chest when, unexpectedly, Matthew stood and held out his hand to her. "Dance with me," he said simply. There was no music playing, but Matthew began to sway gently, leading Jessica in a slow dance in the middle of the crowded room. Jessica let herself be guided, losing herself in the moment, forgetting the audience, forgetting the charade. "Thank you," she whispered against his ear. "Always," he replied. And this time Jessica was sure he wasn't just acting. In that moment, rocking in Matthew's arms as her fictional family watched them with love and approval, Jessica realized a terrifying truth. She wasn't pretending anymore. Somewhere between the laughter at dance class and the family breakfasts, between the late-night conversations and the moments of genuine tenderness, she had fallen in love. Not just with Matthew, but with all of it. With the family, with the sense of belonging, with the version of herself that existed in that house. And that made everything infinitely more complicated. After the guests left and the family retired for the night, Jessica and Matthew went upstairs to their room in silence. Anna's necklace was still in their hands, and the weight of the family heirloom felt much heavier than it should have. "You didn't have to do that," Jessica said finally, referring to the song. "Yes, you did. You were panicking." Matthew sat on the edge of the bed. "And besides, the song, I actually learned it for someone once." Jessica looked at him curiously. "For whom?" Matthew hesitated. "For you, actually. A few months ago when you were sick with pneumonia and I brought soup to your apartment. You were asleep on the couch and I thought..." He shook his head. "Forget it. It was stupid." "It wasn't stupid," Jessica said softly. "It was kind. As always." They were silent for a moment, the weight of the unspoken revelations hanging between them. "Jessica," Matthew began. "No," she interrupted him. "Don't talk. If you talk, I'll have to talk too, and I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because this isn't real, Matthew." Jessica stood up abruptly. "None of this is real. We're two people pretending to be in love to fool immigration. We can't forget that." "What if I'm not pretending anymore?" Matthew asked quietly. Jessica felt her heart stop. "Don't say that." "Why not? If it's true." "Because it can't be true," Jessica exclaimed, trying to keep her voice low. "Because I'm your boss. Because you're doing this to help me. Because our entire situation is based on lies." Matthew stood up and approached her. "What if none of this mattered? What if what I'm feeling is real, regardless of how it started?" Jessica backed away, leaning against the wall. "Stop, Matthew, I can't stop," he said, stepping closer. "Because for 3 days now, I've been watching you transform into the woman I always knew existed beneath all that armor. I've been watching you laugh, watching you care, watching you become part of my family like you've always belonged here. It's just the environment," Jessica argued weakly. "It's easy to pretend to be different when you're far from reality. Do you think you're faking it when you play with my nephew? When you listen patiently to Grandma Anna's stories? When you help my mother in the kitchen?" Matthew shook his head. "That's you, Jessica. The real you." Jessica felt tears form in her eyes. "You don't understand. I can't be that person in New York. I can't be vulnerable and still run a company. I can't be kind and still be respected. The world doesn't work that way for women like me." "Who said you have to choose?" Matthew asked. "Who said you can't be strong and kind at the same time?" "Experience," Jessica replied bitterly. 20 years of experience tells me so." Matthew reached out to touch her face, but Jessica dodged it. "I can't do this to you," she whispered. "I can't let you fall in love with a fantasy. What if it's not a fantasy? What if it's who you really are?" Jessica stared at him for a long moment, and Matthew saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of him, but fear of herself. "Then I am a coward," she said finally, "because I don't have the courage to find out." By the fourth day, the tension between Jessica and Matthew was palpable. They barely spoke beyond what was necessary to keep up appearances in front of the family, but everyone seemed to sense that something had changed. "Did you guys fight?" Danny asked directly during lunch. "Of course not," Jessica replied quickly. "We're just, tired from the trip." Anna studied them both with her discerning eyes but made no comment. That afternoon, Grace suggested that Jessica and Matthew go into town alone to spend some time together. It was clearly an attempt to force a reconciliation, but neither of them could refuse without arousing suspicion. They walked the streets of Sitka in awkward silence, stopping every now and then to window shop or take in the ocean view. Finally, Matthew couldn't take it anymore. "We have to talk about last night." "We don't have to talk about anything," Jessica replied without looking at him. "Jessica, this is ridiculous. We're adults." "Exactly. We are adults who can recognize a complicated situation and avoid it." They stopped in front of a small bookstore, and Jessica pretended to study the books in the window. Matthew watched her, noticing how tense she was, how she avoided looking at him. "You know you can't run away from me forever, right?" he said. "We'll have to go back to New York and work together." "Of course I can," Jessica murmured. "I'm very good at running away." Matthew felt a pang of sadness at her admission. "Is that what you want? To escape from anything real?" Jessica finally turned to him, and Matthew saw frustration in her eyes. "What I want doesn't matter, Matthew. What matters is that we have a trade agreement. You help me with immigration, I'll give you a promotion. Simple as that." "Nothing about this is simple," Matthew retorted, "and you know it." They were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Matthew? Matthew Garner?" They both turned to see a beautiful blonde woman approaching with a wide smile. Matthew seemed to recognize her and became visibly uncomfortable. "Sarah. Oi. I couldn't believe it when I heard you were in town." Sarah hugged Matthew warmly. "And with a fiancé? Where is she?" "I'm dying to meet her." Matthew hesitated, clearly not wanting to make introductions. "Sarah, this is Jessica." "Jessica, Sarah. We went out a few years ago." Jessica felt something unpleasant twist in her stomach. Jealousy? It couldn't be jealousy. She had no right to be jealous. Wow, what a surprise. Sarah studied Jessica from head to toe. Matthew always preferred more local women. "You're too sophisticated for his tastes." Jessica forced a smile. "Sometimes people surprise us." "It's true." Sarah laughed, a slightly shrill sound. "Especially Matthew. He's always been a homebody, you know. He never wanted to leave Sitka, never showed interest in anything other than fishing and reading. I'm glad you finally found someone who motivated you to be more ambitious." Jessica looked at Matthew, who looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him. "Actually," Jessica said carefully, "it was Matthew who motivated me to be less ambitious. He taught me that there are more important things than career." Sarah seemed genuinely confused by this information. "How interesting. Well, I have to go, but it was great meeting you, Jessica. And Matthew," she touched his arm, "congratulations. You look happy." After Sarah left, Jessica and Matthew continued walking in even more tense silence. "Ex-girlfriend?" Jessica finally asked. We dated for 2 years in high school and a little after. She wanted me to stay here, start a local business, have kids. Matthew sighed. It didn't work out. And now she's implying that I'm the reason you finally grew up and became ambitious. Sarah doesn't know what she's talking about. Jessica stopped walking and turned to him. Don't you know? Matthew, you left a small town in Alaska to work in New York. You left your family, your friends, everything you knew. And for what? To be an assistant to a woman who treats you like a doormat? I don't see myself like that. No? Then how do you see it? Matthew was silent for a moment. I see myself as someone who was waiting for life to happen and who finally found something worth fighting for. Jessica felt her heart race, but forced herself to maintain her composure. And what is it worth fighting for? Matthew looked her straight in the eyes. You know exactly what it is. That night, the tension in the house was palpable. During dinner, Jessica and Matthew barely spoke, and the family clearly noticed. After the meal, Anna pulled Jessica aside. Honey, can I talk to you? Jessica nodded, though she was nervous. Matthew is suffering, Anna said directly. And so are you. What happened? Jessica opened her mouth to make an excuse, but something in Anna's kind eyes made her hesitate. It's complicated, she said finally. Love is always complicated, my dear. But it's worth fighting for. What if it's not love? What if it's just confusion? Anna smiled sagely. At 83, I've learned to recognize true love when I see it. And I can assure you that what I see between you two is real, even if you're afraid to admit it. Jessica felt tears form in her eyes. Anna, what if I don't know how to love someone? What if I'm too broken for that? Anna took Jessica's hands in hers. No one is born knowing how to love, my dear. It's something we learn. And sometimes the people who had to learn it on their own are the ones who love most deeply. On the morning of the 5th day, Jessica woke determined to end the charade. She could no longer bear the guilt of deceiving this wonderful family, nor the torture of being so close to something she couldn't have. He found Matthew in the kitchen, drinking coffee alone. The rest of the family was still asleep. We need to talk, she said, pouring herself coffee with hands that shook slightly. About yesterday? About Sarah? About everything. Jessica sat at the table across from him. Matthew, we can't go on with this anymore. With what exactly? This farce. This lie. Your family is wonderful and doesn't deserve to be deceived like this. Matthew studied her for a moment. Is this what you really want? To end it all? That's what has to happen. Jessica avoided her gaze. Let's go back to New York today. You'll get your promotion as promised, and we'll find another way to resolve my immigration situation. And what form would that be? Jessica hesitated. The truth was, there was no other way. But she was desperate to escape before things got even more complicated. I'll hire an immigration lawyer. Maybe there's a legal loophole we haven't explored. Jessica, you know this won't work. You researched every option before. Before you decide to deceive your family? Jessica interrupted him bitterly. Yes, I know, but at least you'll be honest. Matthew stood up abruptly, frustrated. Honest? Since when do you care so much about honesty? You lied to Bob. You lied to immigration. You lied to my family. Why is honesty suddenly so important now? Jessica also stood up, defensive. Because your family didn't deserve this. They're good, genuine people, and I made them believe in something that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist? Matthew approached her. Jessica, look around. Look how you've transformed in the last few days. Look how you've integrated with my family. This isn't an act. Yes, it is, Jessica exclaimed. I was playing a role. The perfect girlfriend, the ideal daughter-in-law. None of that is me. Nonsense, Matthew said softly but with intensity. This is you, Jessica. Maybe for the first time in your adult life, this is really you. Jessica felt tears of frustration burning her eyes. You don't understand. I can't be that person in New York. I can't be vulnerable and keep my business. I can't what? Be happy? The question hit her like a punch in the stomach. Sometimes happiness is a luxury we can't afford, Jessica said softly. Or sometimes it's the only thing that really matters. They were interrupted by footsteps on the stairs. Grace appeared in the kitchen, looking surprised to find them awake so early. Good morning, my dears. Such early risers. She stopped when she noticed the tension in the air. "Is everything okay?" Jessica and Matthew glanced at each other quickly. "We were just planning the day," Jessica lied. Grace didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. "Well, I'm glad you're awake. We have a surprise for you today." "What kind of surprise?" Matthew asked cautiously. "Father O'Connor is in town and has agreed to officiate your wedding this afternoon," Grace announced radiantly. "Isn't it wonderful? You can get married right here at home with your whole family present." Jessica felt the blood drain from her face. Matthew looked equally shocked. "Mom, we don't plan on getting married so soon," Matthew stammered. "Nonsense, why wait? You're in love. And with all this immigration fuss, it would be better to make it official soon." Grace clasped her hands together, overcome with emotion. "Anna's already started making the cake. Joe's gone to get the flowers, and I've picked out a dress that might fit Jessica." Jessica opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water. That's very generous, but..." "No buts," Grace insisted. "It will be perfect. A simple, intimate ceremony, exactly as it should be." After Grace left to wake the rest of the family with the good news, Jessica and Matthew were left alone again, both in shock. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered. "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" "I don't know," Matthew admitted. "If we refuse now, they'll know something's wrong. We can't really get married, Matthew. That would be illegal, immoral, or just terrifying." Matthew stared at her. "Jessica, maybe this is the universe giving us a sign." "A sign of what?" "That we stop fighting against something that clearly wants to happen." Jessica looked at him as if he had gone crazy. "Are you suggesting we get married for real? Based on what? A few days of pretending? Based on the fact that you're the most incredible woman I've ever met? Based on the fact that over the past 3 years, you've become the most important person in my life, even when I was just your assistant? Based on the fact that being here with you, seeing you with my family, has made me realize that I've been in love with you for much longer than I care to admit." Jessica felt her world turn upside down. "Matthew, and I know you feel something too. I see it in the way you look at me, in the way you relax when we're alone, in the way you allow yourself to be vulnerable around me." "Even if that were true," Jessica said, struggling to keep her voice steady, "it doesn't change anything. I can't build a marriage based on needing a visa. So don't build on that. Build on love." The word hung in the air between them, laden with possibilities and terrors. "I have to get out of here," Jessica said suddenly, heading for the door. "Where are you going? Walking? Thinking? Anything?" "Jessica, wait." But she had already left, leaving Matthew alone in the kitchen with the weight of her unrequited confessions. Jessica walked aimlessly through the streets of Sitka, her mind a jumble of conflicting emotions. Matthew's words echoed in her head. Build on love. As if it were so simple. As if love were enough to overcome years of self-preservation and fear. She found herself in the small park downtown, sitting on a bench facing the ocean. The cold Alaskan air bit her face, but she barely noticed. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Anna approach until the older woman sat down beside her. "Troubled mind?" Anna asked gently. Jessica laughed humorlessly, something like that. "Want to talk about it?" Jessica looked at Anna, her kind eyes, her calloused hands that told the story of a lifetime of hard work and unconditional love. How could she explain that the entire foundation of her relationship with Matthew was a lie? "Anna, can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. How did you know you loved your husband?" Anna smiled, her eyes growing distant with memory. "Oh, what a beautiful question." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I knew when I realized he saw me, really saw me, even when I didn't want to be seen, when I was messy, or angry, or insecure. He saw all of that and loved me not in spite of it, but because of it." Jessica felt her throat tighten. "What if you were afraid? Afraid that you weren't good enough for him?" "Oh dear," Anna chuckled softly. "I was so scared. I came from a poor family with no formal education. Henry was the town doctor's son. Everyone said I wasn't good enough for him. How did you overcome this fear?" "I'm not over it," Anna admitted. "I lived with him during our first years of marriage. But you know what I learned? The fear of not being worthy of love is far less powerful than the courage to accept love when it's offered. Jessica absorbed these words in silence. Anna, what if the whole basis of the relationship was complicated? What if it started for the wrong reasons? Anna studied her for a moment. Jessica, my dear, it doesn't matter how love begins. It matters how it grows. She took Jessica's hand. Do you love my grandson? The blunt question struck Jessica like a bolt of lightning. She had avoided asking herself the question, but now, sitting on that bench with Anna, she could no longer escape the truth. Yes, she whispered. God help me, I do. And does he love you? He says yes. So what's the problem? Jessica laughed through the tears that had begun to fall. The problem is I'm a terrible person. I'm cold and controlling, and I've been lying to you since I got here. Anna was silent for a long moment. Can I tell you a secret? She finally said. Jessica nodded. I knew there was something off about you two from day one. Jessica felt her stomach sink. What? Matthew never mentioned a girlfriend in 3 years, and suddenly he shows up with a fiancé? You were very careful with each other. Very polite. Anna smiled. But you know what else I noticed? Jessica shook her head, too shocked to speak. I noticed how you looked at each other when you thought no one was looking. I noticed how Matthew became more protective, more attentive. I noticed how you softened, how you started to really laugh. Anna squeezed Jessica's hand. It doesn't matter how it started, dear. What matters is that it became real. Did you know? I suspected, and I wasn't the only one. Grace felt the same way, but we decided that if you two needed an excuse to discover you loved each other, who were we to interfere? Jessica felt simultaneously relieved and mortified. You must think I'm horrible. I think you're a brave woman who did something desperate for love, even if you didn't know it was love at the time. Anna stood up. And now you have a choice. You can run away back to your safe but lonely life in New York, or you can have the courage to accept what's being offered. What if I don't know how to make this work? Nobody knows, dear. That's why we call it a leap of faith. When Jessica returned home an hour later, she found the entire family frantically preparing for the wedding. Grace was arranging flowers, Joe was moving furniture to create a ceremony space, Danny was polishing Matthew's dress shoes, and Anna was putting the finishing touches on a simple but elegant cake. Matthew stood in the living room, looking lost and worried. When he saw Jessica, his eyes filled with relief. You're back, he said softly. I went back. And about this afternoon, Jessica took a deep breath. It was time to make the most important decision of her life. Matthew, I need to tell you something. He seemed to prepare for the worst. Anna knew, Jessica said quickly. She knew there was something strange about us from the start. Matthew paled. Will she tell others? No. She said it doesn't matter how it started. It only matters that it became real. Jessica looked him straight in the eye. The question is, did it become real, Matthew? For me, yes. A long time ago. His voice was firm, without hesitation. And for you? Jessica felt like she was on the edge of a cliff, about to jump without knowing if there was a safety net below. For me, too, she finally admitted. The smile that spread across Matthew's face was like the sun rising. So what do we do about the ceremony? Jessica looked around the house full of love and preparations, thought of the family who had welcomed her even though they suspected she wasn't entirely honest, thought of Anna offering the family necklace, thought of 3 years of working alongside the man she now knew she loved. I think, she said slowly, we're married. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon, and at 3:30 Jessica was in the room, wearing the wedding dress Grace had worn 30 years before. It was simple but elegant. Ivory silk crepe with lace sleeves and a skirt that flowed gently to her ankles. Anna's necklace was around her neck. Grace and Anna were with her, making the final adjustments. You look beautiful, darling, Grace said, tears welling in her eyes. Absolutely radiant. Jessica looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman she saw. Her hair was loose in soft waves, her face was flushed and relaxed, and her eyes shone with something she could finally identify as genuine happiness. I'm nervous, she admitted. Everyone gets nervous on their wedding day, Anna assured. It's normal. But Jessica knew her nerves weren't normal. In less than an hour, she would be marrying a man she'd known as both a boss and an employee. She would be promising a lifetime based on a few days of mutual discovery. It was crazy. It was reckless. It's love, she murmured to herself. What, dear? Grace asked. Nothing. Just, I'm ready. Downstairs, Matthew was wearing the suit he'd brought from New York, with a tie borrowed from his father. He looked almost as nervous as Jessica felt. Are you sure about this? Danny asked, fixing Matthew's lapel for the third time. More certain than I've ever been about anything in my life, Matthew replied, and realized it was true. Father O'Connor was a kindly elderly man who had officiated weddings for the Garner family for decades. He had arrived half an hour early and was talking to Joe about the ceremony. It will be simple, he was explaining. A few words about the marriage commitment, the vows, the rings, and that's it. You'll have a married couple. Matthew touched the pocket containing the simple wedding rings he and Jessica had purchased from Sitka's only jewelry store that morning. They had chosen them quickly, still somewhat dazed by the decision to actually get married. But when Jessica tried on the ring and it fit perfectly, they both took it as a sign. At 4 o'clock sharp, Jessica came downstairs. Matthew was waiting for her in the living room, which had been transformed into a makeshift chapel with flowers and candles. When he saw her, his heart stopped. She looked absolutely stunning. But more than that, she looked happy. Truly, genuinely happy. The family was there. Grace and Joe, Anna, Danny, and a few nearby neighbors who had been quickly invited. It was small and intimate, exactly as it should be. Father O'Connor began the ceremony with a few words about love and commitment. Jessica barely listened, completely focused on the man in front of her. When it came time for the vows, Matthew went first. Jessica, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I promise to love you not only for who you are, but for who you inspire me to be. I promise to be your partner in every aspect of life, your best friend, your biggest supporter. I promise to see you, really see you every day for the rest of my life. Jessica felt tears well up in her eyes. When her turn came, the words came from her heart, not from any rehearsed script. Matthew, you taught me that it's possible to be strong and vulnerable at the same time. You showed me that I deserve to be loved not just for my achievements, but for who I am deep down. I promise to fight my fears every day to be worthy of the love you offer. I promise to be your partner, your confidant, your greatest advocate. When they exchanged rings, Jessica felt as if something fundamental had shifted. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a real commitment to a future she was choosing to build with this incredible man. By the power vested in me by the state of Alaska, Father O'Connor announced, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Matthew approached Jessica, his hands gently cupping her face. Are you sure? He whispered, so softly that only she could hear. More certain than I've ever been, she replied. The kiss was soft, sweet, and full of promise. When they broke apart, the small audience erupted in applause and shouts of joy. But midway through the celebration, Jessica felt a pang of guilt. This wonderful family was celebrating a wedding that had begun as a sham. They deserved to know the truth. During the small reception that followed, cake, champagne, and lots of family stories, Jessica pulled Matthew aside. They deserve to know, she said softly. Know what? The truth. How it all started. Why we really came here. Matthew studied her for a moment. Are you sure? This might change how they see us. They took us in based on a lie. If we're going to be a real family, we have to start with honesty. Matthew nodded, understanding her logic. Okay, let's count. They gathered the family in the living room after the reception. Jessica was nervous but determined. Guys, she began, Matthew and I have something to tell you. Something about how we actually started dating. The family gathered, curious. The truth is, Jessica took a deep breath. We weren't dating when we got here. This all started because I need a marriage visa to continue living in the United States. Grace let out a small sigh. Joe frowned. Danny looked confused. I asked Matthew to pretend to be my fiancé to fool immigration. Jessica continued quickly. I know it was terrible, and I'm sorry I lied to you. You didn't deserve this. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica felt her heart sink. She had ruined everything. Then Anna started laughing. Oh dear. she said, getting up to hug Jessica. "Do you really think we're that naive?" Jessica looked around, confused. "We knew something was off," Grace admitted. "But we could also see that you cared for each other. And today, when I saw you exchanging vows, and that wasn't an act. You guys, aren't you mad? Brave?" Joe laughed. "We're impressed that you finally found the courage to get married." "But it started out as a lie," Jessica protested. "And it became love," Anna said firmly. "That's what matters." Danny walked over and hugged both Jessica and Matthew. "Welcome to the family," he said simply. Officially. 3 weeks later, Jessica and Matthew were back in New York, but everything had changed. They had rented a larger apartment together, and Jessica was slowly learning to balance her professional self with the person she had discovered she was in Alaska. The transition wasn't easy. On her first day back at work, Jessica struggled to revert back to her ruthless boss mode. She found herself smiling at employees, asking about their families, and thanking them for a job well done. People were initially suspicious. Some even asked if she was feeling okay. "It's weird," she commented to Matthew over lunch. "It's like I've forgotten how to be the old Jessica." "Maybe because the old Jessica was a performance," Matthew suggested. "And now you don't have to perform anymore." Matthew had quickly adapted to his new role as assistant editor. Having his promotion officially confirmed had changed the office dynamic, and Jessica discovered she enjoyed working with him as a partner rather than a subordinate. "We have to talk about Richardson's manuscript," Matthew said, walking into Jessica's office with a stack of papers. "What's wrong?" "I think it's overwritten. It needs substantial cuts in the middle chapters." Jessica had learned to value Matthew's opinions, but this time she disagreed. "I disagree. I think the middle chapters are essential to character development, but they slow down the narrative," Matthew argued. "Not every story needs to be a thriller. Sometimes the slow buildup is intentional." They debated for 15 minutes, each defending their position. In the end, they reached a compromise, cutting some chapters but keeping the essential development elements. "You know what's funny?" Jessica said after they resolved the issue. "What?" "That's it. We fought, we disagreed, and we came up with a solution better than any of our original ideas. Like a true team." Matthew smiled. "Like a real wedding." The immigration issue had been resolved quickly after the wedding. The official who had initially questioned the validity of the relationship was impressed by the Alaskan wedding photos and the Garner family's enthusiastic testimonials. "You clearly have the support of your family," he had commented. "And you obviously know each other well. Congratulations, Mrs. Roy Garner." Jessica had decided to keep her professional name, but legally add Garner. It was a symbol of her new, integrated life. A month after the wedding, they received an unexpected call from Anna. "Dear ones," she said when Jessica answered, "I have a question for you." "Of course, Grandma Anna. What's up? When are you going to give us great-grandchildren?" Jessica almost dropped the phone. "Anna, we just got married." "Exactly. Enough time has passed. I'm not getting any younger, and I want to meet my great-grandchildren." Matthew, who could hear the conversation from across the kitchen, started laughing. "Let's think about it, Anna," Jessica replied diplomatically. "Don't think too much. Life is short, and love is rare." After they hung up, Jessica and Matthew were silent for a moment. "Children," Matthew said finally. "Children," Jessica echoed. "Is this something you want?" "Eventually?" Jessica thought about it. 3 months ago, the idea of children would have been absurd. She could barely keep a plant alive, let alone raise a child. But now, after experiencing the warmth of a real family, "I think so," she said slowly. "Not now, but yes." "And you?" "I've always wanted children. I just never thought I'd find someone I wanted to have them with. And now?" Matthew approached her and pulled her into his arms. "Now I can perfectly picture a little girl with her intelligent eyes and her determination. Or a boy with his kindness and sense of humor. Or both," Matthew suggested with a smile. "Easy, cowboy," Jessica laughed. "One step at a time." That night, as they lay in bed in their new apartment, Jessica reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. "Matthew? Thanks. Why? For showing me who I could be. For teaching me that I didn't have to choose between being strong and being loved." Matthew turned to look at her in the darkness. You didn't need to learn this, Jessica. You just needed to remember. This person was always there. Maybe. But I needed you to help me find her. Matthew kissed her forehead gently. And I needed you to teach me that it's possible to have ambition and still hold on to what's important. We are a good team. We are a good couple. 6 months later, Jessica was in the office reviewing the quarterly report when her assistant, she had finally hired someone to replace Matthew, knocked on the door. Mrs. Roy Garner? There's a Matthew Garner here to see you. He says it's urgent. Jessica frowned. Matthew was at a conference in Chicago and wasn't due back until the next day. Let him in. Matthew walked into the office with a huge smile and a bouquet of wildflowers, the same kind that grew around his parents' house in Alaska. "What are you doing here?" Jessica asked, standing up to hug him. "I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow." "Change of plans," Matthew said, sounding inexplicably excited. "We have to leave. Now." "Leave? Where to?" "Matthew, I have 3 meetings this afternoon and—" "Cancel." Jessica looked at him like he'd lost his mind. The Matthew she knew would never ask her to cancel meetings without a good reason. "What is happening?" "It's a surprise. But you have to trust me. Grab your coat and let's go." Jessica studied his face, searching for clues. He was clearly hiding something, but he looked happy, not worried. "Does this have anything to do with your family?" "Maybe. Maybe not. Are you coming or not?" Jessica looked at her desk full of work, then at the man who had completely changed her life. The decision was easy. "I'll get my coat." 3 hours later, they were on a plane to Seattle. Jessica had pressed Matthew for details, but he refused to explain anything beyond, "It's a nice surprise. At least tell me if I need warm clothes," she begged. "Definitely cold weather clothes." From Seattle Airport, they caught another flight to Anchorage, and from there to Sitka. Jessica was completely lost. It wasn't anyone's birthday that she knew of. It wasn't a holiday, and she couldn't imagine what emergency would require them both to leave New York immediately. When they arrived in Sitka, Joe was waiting at the airport with the truck, smiling mysteriously. "Hi, kids. How was the trip?" "Daddy, are you in this too?" Jessica asked. "In what?" Joe feigned innocence. "I just came to pick you up at the airport." During the drive home, Jessica noticed there seemed to be more activity than usual in the city. Extra cars parked on normally empty streets, people she didn't recognize walking the streets. When they arrived at the Garner house, Jessica immediately understood what was happening. The yard was decorated with lights and flowers, tables were set outside, and what seemed like half the town was in attendance. "Surprise!" Grace shouted, running to hug Jessica. "It's your real wedding party." Jessica looked around, stunned. There was a flower-decorated arch where she and Matthew had been married, a table with a 3-tiered wedding cake, a local band playing soft music, and at least 50 people she recognized from the few days she had spent in the city. "But we're already married," she said, confused. "Yes, but this is the celebration," Anna explained, appearing in a new dress and a radiant smile. "A party so the whole town can officially meet our new daughter-in-law." Matthew approached Jessica, laughing at her shocked expression. "Did you organize this?" she asked. "With a lot of help from family, I thought you deserved a proper celebration." Jessica felt tears well up in her eyes. In her entire life, no one had ever thrown her a party. She had never been the center of a joyful celebration. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Grace said, taking Jessica's arm. "You just have to have fun. This is your family now, and we want you to feel at home." The party was magical. Jessica was introduced to people who had heard of her but had never met her in person. Everyone had stories to tell about Matthew growing up, and everyone wanted to know about her life in New York. "So you really run a publishing house?" asked Martha, the owner of the local bookstore. "How exciting. I've always dreamed of meeting someone from the book world." "And did you really make Matthew fall in love?" joked Tom, a friend from school. "We were starting to think he was going to stay single forever." During the party, Jessica found herself completely relaxing for the second time since meeting the Garner family. She danced with Joe, listened to embarrassing stories about Matthew from her cousins, and even sang along with the local band when they played a song she knew. As the sun began to set, painting the Alaskan sky in shades of pink and gold, Matthew pulled Jessica to a quieter corner of the yard. "How are you feeling?" he asked, overwhelmed. Happy, grateful. Jessica paused. Loved. You are loved. By everyone here, but especially by me. Jessica looked around the party. Anna teaching a folk dance to some children, Grace packing up slices of cake for guests to take home, Joe telling fishing stories to a group of older men, Danny taking pictures of everything so she could take memories back to New York. Matthew, trying. I want you to come more often. Not just for quick visits, but to actually spend time here. This is your family and now it's mine too. You mean that? I thought you found it very different from your life in New York. It's different. It's slower, simpler, more real. Jessica smiled. And I think I need more of that in my life. We do. What about work? You've always said that publishing required constant attention. The publisher will survive a few trips to Alaska. And who knows? Jessica looked at him with a mischievous expression. Maybe I'll find some talented writers here. Have you considered a series of books about life in Alaska? Matthew Ryu. Always thinking about business. Always thinking about how to integrate all parts of my life. Jessica corrected. When it was time to cut the cake, Anna made a toast. To Matthew and Jessica, she said, raising her champagne flute, who started with a lie but found a truth, who taught us that love can grow in any soil, as long as it is watered with honesty and patience. And that give us hope, Grace added, that there is someone special out there for all of us, even when we least expect it. For family, Joe concluded, that grows not just by blood but by love. Everyone toasted and Jessica felt a sense of completeness she had never experienced before. Later that night, after all the guests had left and the family had retired for the night, Jessica and Matthew walked along the beach. The full moon reflected on the calm water, and the cool Alaskan air was filled with the sound of waves and the distant calls of night birds. Thank you, Jessica said, breaking the comfortable silence. Why? For everything. For bringing me into your family. For showing me who I could be. For organizing this incredible party. For loving me even when I didn't know how to love myself. Matthew stopped walking and turned to her. Jessica, you know I would do anything for you, right? I know. And you know I would do anything for you too? Even giving up full control of the publisher to spend more time here? Jessica laughs. Especially this. I've discovered there are more important things to control. Like what? As a connection, as a family, as a love that doesn't have to be earned or deserved, but is given freely. Matthew kissed her softly, and Jessica allowed herself to sink into the moment. 6 months ago, she was a lonely, controlling woman who had fabricated a fake engagement to solve a visa problem. Now she was a beloved wife, an adopted daughter-in-law, and someone who had finally learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was courage. Matthew? I think I'm ready to start thinking about those kids Anna wants. Matthew pulled back to look at her, surprised. Serious? Seriously. I want them to have grandparents who spoil them, cousins to play with, and a home where they always feel loved. I want to give them everything you had growing up. And you? What do you want? Jessica smiled, finally knowing the answer with absolute certainty. I want this. This life, this family, this love. I want it all. Matthew spun her around in the air, both of them laughing like children. Then we'll have it all, he said, setting her down but keeping her in his arms. We'll have the life we always deserved. As they walked back home hand in hand, Jessica reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her here. She had started out as a woman who didn't believe in love, who had built walls so high around her heart that she'd forgotten how to let anyone in. But Matthew had found a secret door in those walls, and her family had helped her tear them down completely. Now she was exactly where she belonged, not just geographically, but emotionally. She had found her tribe, her place, her home. And for the first time in her adult life, Jessica Roy Garner was truly, completely, and irrevocably happy. 2 years later, as she rocked her 6-month-old daughter on the porch of the house she and Matthew had bought in Sitka for their summer vacation, Jessica sometimes wondered what her life would have been like if she hadn't concocted that fake engagement. She'd probably still be in New York, working 60 hours a week, eating alone, and wondering why she felt so empty despite all her success. Instead, she had Matthew, who made her laugh every day, She had Anna, who had become the mother she never had. She had Grace and Joe, who treated her like the daughter they always wanted. She had Danny, who had become the brother she never imagined she wanted. And now she had tiny Emma, with Matthew's eyes and Jessica's determined chin, who had brought even more love into their already abundant lives. The publishing house still existed and thrived, but now Jessica had learned to delegate, to trust her team, and not to sacrifice what truly mattered for professional success. She and Matthew split their time between New York and Sitka, creating a life that honored both their ambitions and their hearts. And every night, as she lay next to the man who had started as her assistant and become her everything, Jessica thanked the universe for the desperate courage that had led her to invent that fake engagement. Because sometimes, the best love stories begin with the best intentioned lies and turn into the most beautiful truths.